Hey there, welcome to episode 116 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation here in Las Vegas. We are recording this at 4:18 p.m. on Tuesday, May 6, 2025. I will add that this is the second attempt at recording this, so we won't go into the details, Audacity, crash. Today's episode, the other stuff, some of the other things that go into civic volunteer initiatives, what makes up a whole team. It isn't just coders, hint. If you've not heard of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation previously, if this is your first time listening to the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program, very briefly, we are a civic volunteer organization founded in 2022, January 2022. We rebooted the Code for Vegas organization, a former Code for America brigade. In January, we rebooted it as the Code for Vegas Foundation. Well, somewhere between January and June, we decided to become an independent entity rather than rebooting as a brigade. So in June of 2022, we incorporated as a Nevada nonprofit corporation, the Code for Vegas Foundation. We became a public charity in October, retroactive to June of 2022. And we renamed ourselves right around October of 2022 to Innovate for Vegas Foundation to not only be more inclusive of people who are not coders, so basically anyone would feel welcome. It's right there in the name. We're not just coders, but as well the Code for America Brigade sunsetting and so on and so on. Inside baseball. Hopefully, wherever you found this audio program, which is indeed a discussion about innovating in Las Vegas, you are able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, which has a summary that I will read, and our usual 4 links about our organization and 2 of our key initiatives. So let's get started so we can get finished. The summary of today's episode: there is still a need to remind people that civic volunteerism, and many things in fact, require more than code, and so we will do that again today. The 4 links, the 4 usual links, are our homepage, innovateforvegasfoundation.org. I'm sorry, the Innovate for Vegas Foundation homepage, innovateforvegas.org, innovateforvegas.org. All one word, no punctuation, Innovate for Vegas, and then a period, and then ORG. You'll find the usual stuff there. Project hyphen, and that's the key next to the 0 on most keyboards, ACT, ACT, period, info, projectact.info. That is our autonomous cohort tessellation initiative that is open to the world to collaborate upon. It is our focus on discovery of civic volunteerism and other such things to connect, communicate, and collaborate between cohorts, or to at least enable that. Agileforvolunteers.org, all one word, agile, FOR, volunteers.org, is our take on the Agile methodology from developed by and for programmers in 2001, February of 2001, in fact. So, production by street. We've taken those first principles without the impact, the influence of the Agile industrial complex over the last 24 years to try to build something that works for volunteers rather than full-time employees and is not just for programmers. So we'll see how that goes. Agile for Volunteers is actively developed right now, and in fact, our primary focus at the moment. Mastodon.vegas, I've mentioned it many times. Mastodon, Mastodon.vegas, will be our deployment of a geographically focused Mastodon server. It is fast becoming a front burner thing to focus upon and getting it launched as part of our My Muni and Welcome initiatives. Smarter Smart City starts with an informed community of smart people. They will be smarter for being connected and communicating. So those are the links. I didn't go searching for links about the various topics of today's episode. There are many to be found. Which is the right one? Who knows? Wikipedia could be a good start, but maybe not. So let's get started. 2 of our links that I've just mentioned, Project ACT and Agile for Volunteers, kind of fall into this. I have covered Agile for Volunteers more lately, but I found a typo, sorry. But let us reflect for a moment on the non-tech elements of this Agile for Volunteers and of Project ACT So both of them have GitHub repositories, actually organizations for each, and there will be various tools and file formats and documentation. So they're proceeding as technical projects, initiatives. While both these include aspects of technology, of course, they are both focused on collaboration and connection between actual people. And you know what that means? Once people are involved, it's no longer just tech. While tools are important, and there is often, but not always, tech involved in these sorts of things, the real importance is found in the people who participate, not only in the tools development, if it is tools, but in their use for bigger things and their contributions of the other parts of those bigger things. Let us remember, not everything is code. So if ideally we use Agile for Volunteers and Project ACT to accomplish larger ends, the tech works, but it's the people that make use of these tools and the tech to accomplish these bigger things that'll be more important, maybe at least as important. If these two initiatives go to plan, we will have starting points for discovery with Project ACT. The Tesla, there's autonomous cohort transformation as well. That's how we started Project ACT in October 2022, coincidentally. And granular communication of intent with Agile for volunteers. Both purpose-built to work with volunteers who are not spending their full-time days on important work, the civic volunteer stuff, maybe they have day jobs, that might benefit from more awareness on the part of the rest of the world. In other words, if you're working on something and nobody knows about it, well, I think we've all been there. So let's touch on the tech and then get that out of the way. So to be honest, tech is a part of all of this. There's no getting around that. So I'm not saying anything but tech is the way. I'm not a Luddite. However, the tech side of civic volunteerism often receives the bulk of the attention. And in fact, sometimes there are disclaimers put up front with or in or at meetups of organizations with tech and code and maybe similar terms in their names, that there is more to it than just tech. We are called tech, but there is more to it than just tech. And, we were there. We were there as Code for Vegas. We would sometimes get the, I'm not a coder, could I participate? Back when people were participating in such things. So naming matters. I myself am an engineer, computers mostly, and I did my time in Silicon Valley back in the day. There is always huge value including non-technical skills and insights. By non-technical, I mean non-coders, because some things are still technical. By the way, none of this is diminishing anyone. It's just pointing out that there is a need for a diversity of skills and interests and insights. I've actually talked about our views on inclusivity and diversity and whatnot. They're much more about not preventing civic volunteers from contributing and recognizing that code is not the whole world. Remembering that building something for everybody is not always best done by people who see the world through a coding lens. Not everything is code. The same applies to civic volunteerism and applying the gold that is volunteer time, effort, and expertise to communities near and far. Often the use of tech will come down to creating or adapting communication tools and technology to connect people, to communicate awareness, and to collaborate on solutions. This is why all of this benefits from more than coder-only participation. I think if you look around, if you're able to locate, discover civic volunteer-driven community elevation projects around the United States and maybe beyond, you'll find that quite often there's a real-world gap to fill. Awareness, sharing of information, something as simple, quote-unquote simple, there are air quotes definitely, around public transit schedules and maybe road detours or access to food in food banks, or maybe you live in a temperate climate, so access to cooling resources or the opposite, maybe warming resources in the winter. So where are these things? Yeah, so not everything is a mobile application because not everybody has a mobile device to consume your tech project. Sometimes it's about getting the word out and about making tools that enable that more easily, and so on and so on and so on. So yeah, not everything is tech. Sometimes we forget that. So the first thing that is not always tech is the user experience. People who understand people, who know they could, I did this the first time too. Let me start over. People who understand people. Who knew they could be so important when it comes to this stuff? Developing a user interface is often handed over to some coders, the front-end developers, air quotes again, But here's a fun fact. There are people who approach this from the other direction, applying what they know about human interaction to the digital side of how they engage. So your front-end developer might know how to develop front-end, but may not have any idea about the humans that will be making use of it. The important thing about interacting with communities of people, they are not all thinking about spending their time doom scrolling or binge watching. Sometimes they want to know about, understand, and even participate in solving some issues that impact them. Maybe it's a pothole in their street. Maybe it's habitat encroachment is one of my favorite go-to topics. Why am I seeing more snakes and coyotes in my neighborhood? That's a Vegas example. They may be more interested in the action than the look, right? A cool-looking website that doesn't help them may be less interesting. They may want to find the people or resources that will be a part of the solution they seek, and they may want to focus on locality over huge megacorps profiting from the attention economy. There is a difference. The nice thing about working for people in our communities to make these connections, communication, and collaborations a bit easier to dive into and learn about is that you will likely encounter them in real life, user experience up close and personal. Often, this is something we've talked about here, often you'll run into people who, I do it anyway, who will describe something that needs to be fixed or needs to be addressed. I wish this would work better. I wish we could figure out where to find, et cetera, fill in the blanks. So to be able to come back to those people, and I just did this the other day, would you be willing to participate in the design of the thing that you're talking about? And they say yes, so we'll see. But generally speaking, if you can engage people and say, oh, we're working on that, or we fixed that, or hey, you ever visit this website to get started, or come to this meetup and have this discussion. So user experience does involve engaging humans, and what better way to do it than starting in your own backyard? YIMBY? Speaking of engaging with people, how about some marketing and storytelling? How about that? Yeah. One of the challenges faced by any civic volunteer organization is getting the word out to, everyone about what they are doing and who's doing it and why they're doing it and how others can be a part of it. What is this thing? Multimedia presentations are a part of it sometimes, maybe an audio program like this one, but this is not something to pay attention to only now and then. As you may or may not have noticed, I've been publishing this audio program every week. We did a schedule change, but essentially once a week. That's a good start, in my opinion, but it doesn't end there. Getting the word out about various initiatives is key, of course. If a cohort such as ours builds something really useful like our My Muni initiative to make for a better and more informed Greater Vegas area, or anywhere, really. My Muni is not My Vegas. It used to be. Now we're focusing on enabling any locality. Something we hope would be useful to many people outside of civic volunteerism, Project ACT. That's the other thing. Another example. Without a marketing budget or staff of people focused on promotion, creativity will be important. Telling a good story and connecting with supportive people who will then retell that story is as important as you might imagine. So in other words, we don't really have a budget or the outreach staff, the marketing infrastructure to get the word out about our efforts. So we have to rely on people who believe in what we're doing, who are participating in what we're doing, who are curious at least, and who will help amplify the messaging, point some fingers. Hey, go check this out. Go check out that My Muni. Hey, Project ACT is useful for more than just civic volunteer projects, for connecting, communicating, and collaborating. The part that not everybody grabs initially, the organization and the volunteers that make it happen are even more in need of great storytelling to raise awareness and maybe even grow the participation in the cohort. Something as simple as letting people know that they can participate and contribute in substantial ways without knowing at all how to code. Code for Vegas used to have that very scenario pop up now and then. There is a lot more to all of this than coding. What about accessibility? So one of our core tenets, remembering that there are people who need some accommodation, is a key element of any civic volunteer effort. And knowing what to do with that recollection is even more important. In keeping with the notion that not everything is code, it is not always possible to code the way out of accessibility needs. I always give the example of a street corner near where I'm recording this episode today. It's been for 12 years that I've known of this intersection. There is one corner where there's a ADA compliant ramp. The intersection is fairly high volume, so you probably want to hit that crosswalk button. But unfortunately, that crosswalk button is well beyond the reach of most people in general. And if you happen to be using a wheelchair, a walker, a cane, crutches, if you happen to be limited in any way in your mobility, much less your ability to see, you may find it challenging to get around the small retaining wall. It's only a few inches tall, that holds a bunch of very unstable and difficult to negotiate landscaping between the person on the sidewalk and that walk button. When I've shown this to people who are in the accessibility business, they shake their head and laugh. So common. So not everything can be fixed with an application. Sometimes you actually have to crack the concrete and start over. Accessibility factors in to physical designs and real world interactions, as I've just described, to software and user interfaces, talk to your user experience volunteers. They could probably tell you a little bit about real world interactions as well. And to an overall mindset needed for all aspects of any initiative, where you want people to be able to benefit from the efforts of your cohort or cohorts. In other words, why would you build something that some people cannot use? Don't you want more people to use what you're working on? I usually make language translation a component of accessibility, so designing for all aspects of accessibility can begin with what is sometimes called I-18N, or internationalization. That's an I followed by 18 letters and then the letter N, internationalization. There is entire infrastructure built around language translation. I-18 and its relative L10N for localization, same pattern. And the same sort of thinking can extend to the attention to detail to other aspects of accessibility to bring the efforts to more people in more ways. Now, software accessibility has come a long way. Why ARIA? There are tools to audit your website and whatnot. But again, not everything is code, not everything is a website. So generally speaking, be attentive, pay attention, and bring in other people. We'll talk about co-creation in a moment. Bring in other people to tell you that, hey, this intersection is great, except if you happen to need to use the ramp and the button, then you're kind of out of luck. And they would have known that 12 years ago if they'd bothered to ask. So that's kind of like testing. I got my career start coming out of a recession in 1993 as a tester. I had just graduated from college. As a tester at companies like Apple Computer, not exactly what I had signed up for. And with my shiny new engineering degree, I was trying to be an engineer. But I learned back then, and I know it all too well today, it is important to make sure what you are working actually, wait for it, works. And also don't undersell your testing department or your QA, quality assurance folks. They're doing critical work. People who are interested in quality assurance or QA will often find themselves the frontline advocates of the customer of a product or a project. They're the ones who are paying attention to whether it really works or not, and how well, and when it doesn't, and when it fails. They know how it works, they know what it is supposed to do, and they tend to take proper function personally, as people out in the real world might as well. So many times back in my QA days, someone, myself included, would file a bug, as they say. And then you're looking for that to get fixed. And then you say, hey, you didn't fix my bug. It's a personal endeavor, a personal challenge to make sure that things actually work. Do not make the mistake of discounting the need for testing, nor the value of contributions of attention paid to these efforts. You're not just a tester. You are the person we're building this for, by proxy and in real life. If your user advocates are up for it, they may even consider pursuing a co-creation effort. So the people that are doing the testing as though they are your users, maybe they could talk to your users to connect people in communities to the development process of potential solutions, so that it is not a matter of trying to make something that might work after some other group of people who work on this thing, sequestered away, but becoming a part of the group of people working on this thing as a member of a community or communities, or someone who takes an active interest or who has identified a problem that needs attention and so on. Whole project familiarity and proactive engagement with the people out in the real world can bring real utility to the work of civic volunteers and can definitely add something to the story. The more people who know what you're working on, hey, I took part in that. I was a part of this. My bug got fixed. It's all part of the big picture. Speaking of the big picture, program management. Anybody do that for a living? program and project management, they're kind of specialized. Sort of like QA, you kind of have to understand how the entire project or program is supposed to come together, how it's supposed to work, what it's supposed to do. And then in the workaday world, you're supposed to make sure it comes in on time, on budget, or at least one of those. Program management, it's a tricky title since we tend towards a more flat structure in our organization, with everyone a volunteer and thus no one working for another person. However, we do have embedded in Agile for volunteers within the whole team picture, one, atomic teams participating during an Agile iteration, but who may not be available so often. So an atomic team is a member of the team for an atomic time period, a beginning and an end. And after the end, they may disappear for a month or a year or forever. So hopefully they're able to make a contribution of some sort, and then they bear no responsibility moving forward. They're a contributor. They get credit, but no one is waiting on them for another iteration. Then you have persistent teams. Number two, persistent teams taking on some of the more essential responsibilities to keep initiatives and component projects and teams and all the other moving parts on track. Someone on a persistent team will tend to be around between iterations. We'll do some of the housekeeping. We'll focus on reviewing iteration progress, not for scoring contribution, but for making sure that people are getting what they are hoping for by contributing their time. Nobody wants to contribute volunteer time for something and then have it wither because no one was paying attention. Right? So the program managers if you want to apply that tag to the persistent team members, are the ones who are going to keep an eye on things day to day, who are putting in a little bit extra time, hopefully not too much, but a little bit of extra time to make sure that the value of all of the volunteers' time, effort, and expertise can be realized and will result in some sort of a positive outcome where everybody involved will say, I'm glad I spent my time on that. So those things don't just happen, right? Yeah, everybody knows that, I hope. So the persistent teams are going to be your program managers, your team leads, the people who actually want to roll up the proverbial sleeves and say, you know what, I'm gonna spend a few extra minutes or hours, weeks, making sure that all this comes together. I want to be a part of putting a bow on it when we're done, right? In order to maximize the return on investment of the time, effort, and expertise any volunteer makes to any part of any initiative, a core persistent team really does need to make a commitment on a bit more regular basis. Their own time, effort, and expertise is not only to keep the initiative and its volunteers on the same page, but to recognize where our processes, such as Agile for Volunteers, can improve. So essentially the program management or the persistent teams are presumed to have a little bit more continuity over the course of a particular effort so that they can reflect more completely, more comprehensively on what's working and what isn't as we iterate on things like Agile for Volunteers. If you're only relying on the feedback of production by street, if you only rely on the feedback of the atomic team members or people who can volunteer time now and then, they don't necessarily recognize what's working and what isn't if they're not around. So the value of the program manager role is not lost. I don't know about the title though. The title is not necessarily appropriate. First of all, we're not hiring people, but you're going to have to probably wear a few hats. Having the role though of a program manager, project manager, team lead, a member of a persistent team, they have the time. Production by street still. They have the time to add to this critical responsibility, but there may be actual program and project managers out there who do have that title, who want to take on the specific needs of a particular initiative, a particular civic volunteer effort. And any cohort with a lot to do would benefit from these particular sets of skills. So if you happen to know a program manager or even a project manager who is into civic volunteerism, who wants to see demonstrable results, which are not only good for the story, but also good for the people, again, who contribute their time, effort, and expertise to know that it wasn't wasted. Right? I came here to do a thing. I participated in doing the thing, and we did the thing, and now everybody's happier. That's a good story. It's a little bit brief, but So not just code, that's the take home. This is a reasonable look at this in this episode. You can also listen to a previous episode of this audio program, episode 109, the full stack, about how there is a lot more to all of this than the software and the people who are attempting to pursue so-called civic tech. Full stack is often a term you'll see in job descriptions. Like, do you know all of the things that go into building a website? The database, the coding languages and stuff. But there's a lot more to all of this than that. I've sort of scratched the surface here, but there's a lot more still. There's always more to it, of course. And if the past is prologue, people who are interested in pursuit of civic volunteer contributions in general, or if they bring something specific to the discussion, they will often also bring some aha moments, as in, if you were to come to our office hours on Tuesdays at 6 p.m., or check our website for any rescheduling or changes to that, the gatherings calendar, you may find that the people in our organization might say, I had not considered the aspect of this pursuit that you are keenly aware of. Maybe it wouldn't be phrased like that, but the take home is that if you come to a project from another place, if you visit a cohort of people who are focusing on solving a problem, but you bring some other insights, you may get an aha response. Aha, I didn't know that. I'm glad you told us this. I'm glad we found out this. And this is what co-creation also brings. It's part of the upside to pursuing civic volunteer initiatives with others outside of a fixed geography. There are people who will understand some facet of the goal and will bring ideas and solutions to that facet if you enable the connection, communication, and collaboration at a distance. So, you don't have every skill set, every interest, every awareness in your neighborhood. There's a lot of people out there who actually are interested in civic volunteerism and community elevation. They may be working on something similar to what you're working on. Maybe you should work together. Finally, remember that innovation can take many forms, benefits from more ideas and more discussions, and only matters when ideas and innovations can be implemented or put into practice. Otherwise, it's just homework. It's right there in our purpose statement and in our name. So let's elevate some communities. And if I've said it before, I'll say it again. No, that's not how that works. There's more to it than just code. Not everything is code. Not everything is an app. All of these skills that I've done, and then I've only, again, just scratched the surface. All of these are important. All contribution of civic volunteer or volunteer time in general, volunteer time, effort, and expertise is important. It needs to be recognized and celebrated. And ultimately, it is how successful solutions are delivered to the people next door, down the street, and around the world. So let's get back to work. Thank you, as always, for listening. And, we used to have guests on this program now and then. Don't be shy if you're curious or interested in having these discussions and others about civic volunteerism, elevating communities, and how we can make that happen. Thank you. Till next week.